Okay, I've got to make this video quickly because Galicia is blowing my mind. But I am in a part of Spain that is like to the northeast, and it is, first of all, incredibly beautiful. I don't know if you can see out there, but there's mountains to the horizon, and they literally look like waves, and they get bluer the further you go. But everything is blue. That mountain is like fairly close to me, and everything's got this cool haze on it. And then like even the rocks have this like wave pattern. I don't even know if it's been cut into them or just like this is the way they are, but it is incredibly beautiful. And I don't know that I would have caught it if I hadn't been so late today. But yeah, quickly, unrelated note, but I wanted to talk today quickly about generalism versus being being a generalist versus being a specialist. I've been told a lot that like you need to be a specialist to succeed. And then I talked to someone today and they said being a generalist makes you better prepared for life. And I agree more with the second one. PhDs, especially like what my mom did, tend to be very focused. You have to learn a lot of things to be able to understand your one very specific subject very well. And it makes you theoretically the world's most foremost expert on that topic because you know all the details that no one else can know without the years of research that you've done and reading the exact things you've read. That being said, as a generalist, I find that it's much easier to take up information. And I can learn things fairly quickly and process them. And so let me define them real quick and then I will give you an example. But specialists would tend to be like you have, a few things in a very high depth of knowledge. And a generalist would be, a lot of things in a shallow depth of knowledge. In my case, I prefer to learn a ridiculous amount of things. Like I speak 6 languages. I've dabbled in like at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen others. And I play like roughly 10 instruments. So it's like, I like learning everything, right? And I went to school for mechanical engineering. Now I run a software company. It's just like, I love diving into everything and seeing how they connect. And I think in some ways it's a very unique skill, and it's one that's like sought after if you are in a creative field like marketing or even design engineering. Even in some cases, like being a lawyer, you have to be very creative when it comes to crafting an argument. And I have that backed up by actual lawyers that I know. But anyways, so an example that just came up was like, and I'll elaborate on this more in the recap tomorrow, but was Galician, right? So I know a little bit of Portuguese because on the plane ride over to Spain, where I am right now, I watched the instructional videos and I've studied it a tiny bit before when I was trying to get a Duolingo streak. And then I studied Spanish on and off for about 10 years, but never formally taken a class in it or anything. But I just really like languages, right? But then, like, we're walking across, the plains here and the mountains, and on a lot of signs in this region, you'll see like words with J's in them, and the J's are crossed out and replaced with X's. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, this is a weird form of vandalism. And then when I finally got to this region, which is Galicia, it made sense because the first sign I saw, well, first of all, I met a Brazilian woman and I was like, how is she able to speak Portuguese with everyone here? So, and then it clicked when I saw the sign, which is that Galician is very close to Portuguese and it's settled right in between Portuguese and Spanish. Like I can read a sign in it reasonably well, even with very limited knowledge of Portuguese, but like the O's and the A's in it, which mean it's like la and le in Spanish is o and a in Portuguese, but it's also o and a in Galician, and all their J's are replaced with X's, and that's what made it click, and it was so cool. But it also has features that don't exist in Portuguese, and one of them is the whole X thing. The other thing is that they still use the enye, like the N with the tilde over it, which is something that only exists in Spanish but not in Portuguese. And so it's just interesting to see, and like be able to tell as well, because signs are written in it formally, that it's very likely not a pidgin language, which would be a language that is that doesn't have like a set grammatical structure. It's still being figured out. Like Hawaiian pidgin is a combination of English and the native Hawaiian language, and it's had a lot of issues being standardized and people writing things in it because there's no formal like structure, no formal history to it. But this language appears to have that because they're able to write official documents in it. So I thought that was just wildly fascinating. But these are things like, and as an engineer, I look at the world around me, and everything I see, I have a rough idea of how it was made, how the stone was cut over here, like what kinds of tools would they use? Why would they cut it in this path? What's the easiest way to explore this region? What kind of plants grow here? Why? Why is it that you only see tall plants on the borders of walkways and on the borders of people's lands? How has that affected wildlife? Do you notice that the stones are different in different places, the different colors of green and the grass, the different types of birds that exist around here, the different flowers, and their sparseness or popularity? I mean, all of this stuff comes from like having a little bit of background knowledge in biology, ecology, in mathematics, population distribution, statistics. And it's like you learn a little bit of everything, and then you're able to just sort of like piece together what you encounter. I think that's also a skill that people in the past had a very strong grip on. If you look at people more like our grandparents' age, you'll see that they have a good understanding of how do I fix a car, how do I fix a refrigerator, anything that's in my house, you can handle with your own tools. Now we call handymen for everything, and a lot of times they just use YouTube to fix it. In part because our technology has become more advanced and complicated, but on the other hand, because we've sort of lost that skill. We don't teach creativity in schools, and to some degree we never did, but now it almost feels like it's put down in, through highly standardized tests, and kind of like I even took a literature class that was like intended to make you think, and I did not expect that would be a class where most of us would be told that our answers were wrong when it was analysis based. But really, like, to me, this is the heart of creativity, is being able to derive new meaning from only existing things. And you'll find in college papers, high school papers, etc., it gets kind of boring to reiterate what other people have thought. And you find yourself at many points in your life wondering, when will I be the person who knows how this thing works? How can I say confidently, right? And we experience that as imposter syndrome. Well, part of that is definitely just being able to say, this is what I know. What do you call it? Like, confidently say, this is what I know because I've derived it, because I understand the concepts behind it. I understand how logic works and how to pull one fact out of another. And you're not always going to be right, but it certainly helps. Like, it gives me a good start, and especially when running a company and many of the projects I've done before this, I find this, like, if I have a good grip on a little bit of everything, then I have the ability to be like, oh, I know what I'm missing, right? I have enough knowledge to be like, oh, there's the gap in my knowledge, and then I can go find someone who is more of an expert in that field. So it's perfect. And generalists and specialists coexist. It's kind of fantastic. But I think a specialist-only world definitely winds up hurting us, because you wind up with a bunch of people who, in theory, are so narrow that they're not able to overlap with one another. But the reality of a human is that we're all a little bit of both. It's just that as I've been going through here, looking at languages and such on this trip, it's been, I'm reminded of the times growing up when I was told, like, just focus on something. And even now I'm thinking, I was like, I like engineering, but I know it's not the thing in my life, although I will be doing it probably for the rest of my life. Even languages, I'm like, this is amazing, I love it, I could eat this stuff up all day, but I'm still not sure it's the thing. But I think that is sort of the generalist nature, is like, I hop from thing to thing, and it's not like I don't give it a lot of my effort, but I think for me it's more important to connect things than it is to be engrossed in just that one thing. And so for all the times that I've heard jack of all trades, master of none, it is true. Like, I have not mastered any language besides English, but that does not make my skills not useful. And I think that may go for many people out there, potentially people watching this, or people who have kids that are like that. You find that they're somewhat deviant. It's just another way of looking at the world. And it tends to be that if we're able to lean into those parts of ourselves instead of suppressing them, they come out in very useful ways, in the ability to see the world in a new way, in the ability to solve problems, and the ability to have better relationships, because A, we're being ourselves, and B, we're able to approach it in a unique way. We're able to solve relationship problems in that, how do I express these things to my parents? How do I tell my spouse that this is what I like and not that? How do I show it? How do I show my love for someone? How do I show my hatred for someone? So yeah, all that to say, I like generalism, but specialism is good too. And this is a little expose on how the whole thing works. But yeah, enjoy the rest of this sunset, and I'll see you guys eventually.